everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the dynamic Joe Fordyce. Joe, the Flyers are coming off probably their biggest stud of the season. They had been very good going into that game, but 4-0 loss to the Flames, their first shutout loss of the season, and now another big week ahead for the team. Joe, overall, what did you think of that Flames loss? Did you feel like it was almost getting to that point where we were going to see a letdown from the team, just given how well they had played up to that point?
Yeah, I think they were due, and there's 82 games in the season. They're on a West Coast swing. They won the first two games. We don't want to think this, but human instinct might take over at some point and say, well, hey, we already got the first two games of this trip. We're kind of playing with house money at this point.
Yep.
You would hope the team doesn't think that way. And I'm sure the coaches and players would never admit that they think this way. But as I said, it's sometimes human instinct is just a thing that happens. And what I will say is this, though. When the Flyers play, when you continue to play with fire, you're going to get burned. And the discipline continues to be a fire that the Flyers are playing with almost on a game-by-game basis, taking penalties. And in this game, it caught up to them. They were on the penalty kill a good amount, as they had been in a number of the previous games. And, it seemed to catch up to them. I mean, you're going to wear yourself out if you're killing penalties as much as they have been. And, watching the game, I was thinking to myself, this is going to come back to bite them at some point. You can't keep playing this way. So maybe that's lesson learned. And if so, it's good it happened this early in the season that, you just have to clean up some of the discipline, some of the penalties. And AV said it after the game that taking penalties 200 feet from your own net. I mean, these are penalties. Whenever you hear a coach say reference to 200 feet from your own net, those are penalties that the coach is really unhappy with. So yeah. I definitely got that impression from AV after the game. And I would say this week, you're going to see you're likely going to see a much more disciplined Flyers team in these games coming up against Arizona and Pittsburgh, the next two.
Yeah, entering Monday morning, they lead the league in penalty minutes per game. Now, some of that may be skewed from that crazy Kraken game, but they also had 37 penalties taken, which is pretty high. Too many penalties. Some may not be all on them. Some may be some ticky-tack officiating. But at the end of the day, yeah, you will get burned by penalties. And it felt like that was starting to brew, and it would eventually boil over when you're kind of – yeah, you're really playing with fire when you're committing penalties like that against the Oilers and some of these really good teams, the Panthers. And it kind of came back to bite them against the Flames, that's for sure. The first two goals of that game were power play goals. I mean, Carter Hart was playing really well, and the Flyers were giving themselves a chance, but they committed penalties, and eventually the Flames cracked them on the power play. And it's a 2-0 game at that point in the third period, power play goals. And at that point, felt like the game was over. Joe, did you think the Flyers looked sluggish and tired? I really felt like this game really was due for a letdown. And you don't want to think like that. You want to win every game. It's not like, hey, we're playing well, so now's a decent time to lose one. Like, you don't think like that. Like, great teams don't think like that, and I'm not saying the Flyers were. But when you look at the big picture, they're playing the third game in 4 nights on this road trip. They already won the first 2 games of this road trip. They didn't have Ryan Ellis. They just looked tired and flat, and it felt like this was going to come, especially given the Flames are rolling. The Flames are now 6-1-1, a pretty good team coming off a 5-game winning streak. All 5 games on the road, they come home, and they get the Flyers. It just felt like this was maybe a time for a loss, and lo and behold, it was.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Flames just came off a long road trip, and when a team comes off a long road trip, particularly when they were on the East Coast for a lot of it, they go back home. a lot of times that's the team that starts the game sluggish.
Yeah.
I didn't really see that from Calgary the other night, but what I did see is the Flyers had no ability to get anything going in the offensive zone. Yeah. I mean, they were, to use a hockey cliche, the ice seemed tilted the entire game. All 60 minutes, it seemed like it was tilted because, I mean, if you think about that game, you really come up small if you try to think of a really good scoring opportunity that the Flyers had in the entire game. They really didn't generate anything offensively. Now, when you're taking penalties and you're chasing the game, that tends to happen. You mentioned the other factors, 3 games in 4 nights. You're on a road trip. You already won the first 2. As I mentioned, I'm sure some human instinct creeps in at some point. But it was a little bit concerning that they just could not get anything going. Yeah. I mean, we talked in the post-game show about Jacob Markstrom in that game, and he had a second straight shutout. But I was thinking this might have been the easiest shutout I've ever seen a goalie get because he wasn't really tested the entire game. So let's hope. I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but Arizona's the right team to play coming home, maybe as a get-right game. I believe they're still winless on the season.
Yeah.
Which that in itself is a little bit scary, but I think we'll see a rejuvenated Flyers team that comes out of the gate storming tomorrow night. Yes.
Yeah, a very good opportunity for a get-right game. The Coyotes are 0-8-1, really just kind of spiraling. And the Flyers come home where we believe they'll play pretty well this season. So, but then the schedule certainly turns up with the Capitals and the Penguins. So a really good week for the Flyers. Our first really glimpse, Joe, at divisional play for the Flyers. So that will be very interesting. So yeah, the Coyotes on Tuesday, the Penguins on Thursday, and the Capitals on Saturday. The back half of that, the Penguins and Capitals, those games are on the road. So it will be good challenges. And Joe, just how formidable has this division looked so far? I'm thinking to myself, man, Flyers are off to a really good start. And then I peek at the standings at the Metropolitan Division, and everyone's off to a pretty good start in that division.
Right. And you think, wow, they're off to a pretty good start. And you look at the standings and they're in 5th place. Yeah. And the team that's right ahead of them is Columbus. So I don't think anybody considered to even be a factor in this division this year. The Capitals have had injury problems. They haven't lost a game yet. I think everybody figured the Carolina Hurricanes to be good. Rod Brind'Amour really seems to have things rolling there, and they're atop the division. The other one that stands out to me is the Rangers. The assets that they've collected over the last few years have kind of concerned me. They're a young, up-and-coming team, and it looks like so far that they're kind of putting it together. And I'll tell you, Adam Fox has become one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Yeah. He just piles up points. He really and he makes their power play very scary. And he was scary against the Flyers last year. We saw, the Flyers had some rough games against the Rangers last season. And this team seems to be even more formidable. So, and that's not even to mention Pittsburgh, who's currently in the basement of the division, and Sidney Crosby's only played 1 game for them. Of course, we'll see them later this week against the Flyers. So the teams at the bottom of the division are some of the teams you expect to be at the top when we get to March and April. And that's a scary prospect. This division is going to be there's not going to be any nights off in this division. And that's why, you have to avoid the pitfalls and the stuff we talked about so far on this episode, the human instinct and the sort of take the foot off the gas pedal stuff when you're on a road trip and, you've already gotten a couple wins, because on nights when you're not getting wins, there are other teams in the division that are getting wins. For example, so the Flyers lose to Calgary, and then the Rangers, they won on Friday night at home. They went out to Seattle and got another win last night. So, it's somebody's going to be getting points. So you can't, and it's the old hockey cliche, the 2 points in November or October, as it was this past weekend, count just as much as the ones you earn in March and April. So the Flyers want to avoid, as much as they can, things and games like the one that happened in Calgary on Saturday.
Flyers Talk is brought to you by Great Railing. Stop into Great Railing for the highest quality and lowest prices on all your railing, decking, and fencing needs. Joe, just looking at the goal differentials too in the Metropolitan Division, the worst goal differential in the division is the Devils, and they're at even. They're at 0. Excuse me. The worst goal differential in the division is the Islanders. They're at -1. And then the Devils are second to worst at 0. Everyone else is in the positives. It's just, you look at other divisions across the NHL, a lot of teams are in the minus goal differentials, or at least one division probably has a team that's maybe like the Coyotes, like looking for their first win, or only 1 or 2 wins. Not the Metropolitan Division. The division is legit.
Yeah, and just looking up and down at this division, as you said, when I know New Jersey has an up-and-coming team. As we mentioned, the Rangers have an up-and-coming team. If you went into the season, the only team that I would say was definitely not a playoff team was Columbus, and they are currently sitting ahead of the Flyers. Yeah. The Devils would be the second team, I would say, or would most likely not be a playoff team, and they're currently tied with the Flyers with 9 points. Yeah. So, the Devils have up-and-coming players, and they made moves in free agency. They went out and got Dougie Hamilton. They're not – I'm not saying that they're a pushover either. So I could realistically see every team in this – there's not any team in this division that I would say would surprise me except for Columbus if they made the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's scary, because if you look around the league, I think the Metro is the only division where you can say that. Mm-hmm. The other divisions in the NHL, you have teams where you're like, okay, other teams are going to pile up points and wins against those teams. There are no, as I said, there are no pushovers in this division. And that means you have to have it going every night, and you have to be ready to play and expect a team's best effort every night when you get into divisional play. And the way that the NHL does this schedule now, there's a lot of these Western Conference games early in the season, which means later in the season there's almost exclusively division games, and that's going to be quite a race to the finish, because it won't be easy. This is by far the toughest division in the NHL.
Yeah. Joe, looking at some lineup matters, we can touch on the defense and Ryan Ellis. Obviously, Ellis has missed 4 straight games with an injury, and the Flyers are hoping he can get back in the lineup this week. But looking at the forward groups, I have a feeling Nicholas Aube-Kubel is going to enter the lineup, I think, on Tuesday. He has sat the last 2 games. The Flyers went with Patrick Brown, Zach McEwen, and Nate Thompson on their fourth line. McEwen seems like a good guy to play in those games. He was a former Canuck, so he played his former team. It's always a nice thing to get a guy in against his former team. Sometimes they get up for those games, means something to them. And then he played against the Flames, a team that he's played against a lot in his career too. Thought it made sense to play McEwen there. They wanted to see Patrick Brown. And Nicholas Aube-Kubel hasn't been great. He's committed some penalties. It's kind of given us a reminder of what he did last season. But I think McEwen will come out. It's just my gut instinct. I think McEwen will come out to start this week, and they'll get Nicholas Aube-Kubel back in there. A good chance to get him back in. But what have you thought about the play of the fourth line and where things could shake out moving forward there?
Well, yeah, I would agree with you that they will likely make that lineup change. And it's no knock or anything on Zach McEwen's play. I mean, he really injected life into the team the other night with that fight, and sticking up for teammates and all those sorts of things that you'd like to see, particularly out of fourth line players. And then Nate Thompson had that rush the other night. And unfortunately, the end of the rush turned into a goal the other direction, but he went end to end and kind of did one of those drag moves where he tried to drag the puck past the defenseman and shot the puck just wide. And I didn't know he had that in his bag of tricks. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see him pull that off. And as I said, all in all, the puck ends up in the Flyers' net at the end of that sequence. But that was no fault of Nate Thompson. He was trying to do what he could for his team. And I think Nate has brought some energy to this lineup early in the season here. He had a fight to one game. I mean, they're doing what a fourth line should do. And, I've been happy with their play. Of course, we mentioned the Aube-Kubel penalties, which has been a thing that is not new to anyone. So, but I do think he'll be back in the lineup. But at least it was good to get a look at McEwen and Patrick Brown, as you said, because you want to know what you have depth-wise with that fourth line. And I think the Flyers got to look at that, and they know they have some interchangeable parts down there in the lower part of their lineup.
Indeed. And Patrick Brown was the original guy they got off a waiver. So I think they really want to get a look at him. He can play a little winger and center, real north-south. So I think they want to see him more. Nate Thompson, I don't envision coming out of the lineup until Kevin Hayes gets back. I think he's going to stick in. The team really likes him. The coaching staff really likes him. He could probably play less minutes. He could probably play fewer minutes than he has. But
that is one thing that stands out. And we talk about this when we're watching the games doing pre and post, that it seems like he is on the ice a lot for a fourth line. But it seems like AV likes – when he likes the way his lower lines look, particularly the fourth line, he plays them more minutes. I mean, we remember last season, he would talk about Connor Bunnaman's line when Bunnaman was up with the team a lot, and they would play more minutes. So he really likes to roll four lines, because I found myself, I think it was the Vancouver game, looking at some of the guys that were on the ice very late in that game and thinking, it's interesting that guy's that line is on the ice right now, but that's just the way he likes to roll. And when he's happy with the way they're playing, they play more.
It's an effort-based system. His system is all effort-based, north-south, forecheck oriented. And in order to play that effort through a full game, you need to play four lines. So yes, you're going to play your top two more than your fourth, but you do need your fourth line, because in order to have your top two at its best and playing that hard, get after you system, you're going to need the fourth line to eat up some minutes. But they've also had to kill a lot of penalties. That's why Nate Thompson has played so much, and some of the other guys have, is because Nate Thompson is a PKer who takes PK faceoffs, and they've had to kill so many penalties. Naturally, his minutes are going to rise. So if they commit fewer penalties, Nate Thompson will be on the ice less. But he does a lot of things the team likes, defensive zone draws, PK draws, stuff of that nature. So I think he'll stick. So it just makes sense. I think they'll get Nicholas Aube-Kubel in here coming up. And Zach McEwen committed one of those bad penalties against the Flames. He was called for hooking in the offensive zone late in the game as they're trying to push. So I thought McEwen was fine too on the road trip. I didn't think he was like awful or anything. But he did commit that penalty, and I think it is time to get Knack back in there, see what he can do. Joe, closing us out, looking at some defensemen, I want to ask you about Ryan Ellis, but also Shane Gostisbehere will be back in the house making his return with the Coyotes. But Ryan Ellis has missed 4 straight games. I think we all know his importance. If you can, touch on Ryan Ellis, and also maybe what Shane Gostisbehere did for you during his Flyers career, and as he comes back home. I think it'll be nice to see him.
Yeah. So first off, I do think that this, as the games go on, the Ellis being out of the lineup is more glaring. Yeah. I don't love the look of Rasmus Ristolainen on the power play. I think the power play is a little stagnant right now without Ellis there. So I think that'll be, whenever he comes back, I think that will be a very noticeable addition there. And then just, I feel like Ivan Provorov has struggled without Ellis in the lineup. I really feel like Provorov is a player who feeds off the player that he plays next to. And, they need him back. I mean, there's no team in the NHL that can just lose their number one defenseman and not be affected by it. And quite frankly, having not had him and looking at what their record is, if you would have said that before the season, okay, Ryan Ellis is going to miss this many games early in the season and you're still going to have this record, would you sign up for it? Anybody would. He will definitely, the Flyers need to get him back soon, and hopefully that can happen. As far as Shane Gostisbehere, I was always a fan. I always felt like the Flyers offensively were at their best when Shane Gostisbehere was kind of running things, particularly on the power play. And I was looking at Arizona's lineup the other day, and they, of course, have Jacob Chikrin, who is a up-and-coming defenseman in this league. But I see that Shane Gostisbehere is quarterbacking the number one power play for them, which is, that's what you would expect. And, it shows you that, it shows you a couple things. Arizona, they don't have the greatest lineup, obviously, and their record shows it. But it also shows you that they have a plan for Gostisbehere, and they're going to play him to his strengths, and that is to run the top power play. And the Flyers were always at their best. Their power play was at the best when Shane Gostisbehere was on his game and running that top power play. So that'll be a familiar sight, hopefully not too familiar, and the Flyers don't take too many penalties Tuesday night when they play Arizona. But yeah, I was always a fan of Ghost. I really was. And I always said that I've never seen a player affected by high confidence or low confidence like Gostisbehere was. When he was a highly confident player, he was one of the best players on the ice and could drive the entire offense for the Flyers. But when he was a low confidence player, there were games where he was a total liability on the ice. And that was the part of his game where sometimes it was too much to take. And we saw over the years a number of healthy scratches from time to time when he was in those kind of ruts of not having his confidence high. But overall, I was a Shane Gostisbehere fan, and that season that he came up was one of the more memorable seasons in recent memory. And that was the case because of Shane Gostisbehere and not really any other reason. He came up and energized the team like few I've seen in recent seasons with this franchise.
Indeed. And it's impressive. He's leading the Coyotes in scoring right now with 5 points, all 5 assists. So that's, good for him. Obviously it's the Coyotes and they're 0-8-1 and they're looking for anything right now, but nonetheless, he is leading them in scoring. And yeah, I think he'll get a very nice ovation. I think he'll get a video tribute as he should. I thought he was a really good Flyer, did a lot of good things, was good in the community. And I always enjoyed his honesty. He was always honest with us, the media, always took the time to talk to us, which I really appreciated. Good or bad, though, he was there to talk, and I always thought that was a real pro in him. And he did some really fun things. Like, Joe, you mentioned his rookie year, the 17 goals, the point streak for a rookie defenseman, and then obviously he had the 65-point season. He was an exciting player that gave, I think, Flyers fans some really fun memories, especially when he came up. Really battled injuries, and a guy that was really affected by confidence, so much so that he would admit to us when he was battling confidence issues. He was very honest with us about that. His game was driven on confidence, and he would tell us that. And always appreciated his honesty. Good guy, good player. And yeah, wish him the best in Arizona. I hope they can start winning some games. I can only imagine what it's like for a player in his first year with a new team after being with the one team his entire career, going to a new place and dealing with the issues Arizona is dealing with right now. That can't be easy, but that is, that's life in the NHL. Sometimes it's not easy. So good guy, good player. But yeah, Joe, it's the Flyers will have to get Ryan Ellis back. I think we all know his importance. You're seeing guys kind of play out of position right now because he's not there. I'm with you. I don't love Rasmus Ristolainen on the power play. I think he can do it, but I think he's more of a guy that you wanted even strength and killing some penalties. When Ryan Ellis is back, Rasmus Ristolainen will not be playing on the power play. Justin Braun will not be playing on the top defensive pair. Braun's been good, but he is older too. I think he's much more slotted as a third-line guy right now with Keith Yandle. Right now, he's playing next to Ivan Provorov because Ryan Ellis is out. So we all know Ryan Ellis. I will say,
just to follow up on your point about Braun, I would say if you looked at Braun in the Vancouver and the Edmonton game and then looked at him in the Calgary game, he looked like two different players. And I think this is what happens when you have a guy that should be on your third D pair, second D pair, maybe, but that's playing out of position. He looked a step slow. He was out of position a number of times in that game against Calgary. Whereas if you go back to the first game of the road trip against Edmonton, I mean, he's out there against McDavid's line and he's hanging with McDavid in the corner. And quite frankly, we talked about this on pre and post and maybe even on the last podcast. I think at worst, Justin Braun was the third best player on the entire Flyers team in that Edmonton game. But the cumulative effect of having to play more minutes for a guy at Braun's age with as many games under his belt, I think you saw that catch up to him a little bit in the Calgary game. And, you know, that's why when one of those dominoes is out of place, everything else is, you know, you feel like something could tumble at any point. And, you know, the Flyers need to get things back to good. Again, Arizona's a good team for that, but more so on the health front, they really need Ryan Ellis back in this lineup.
Indeed, and we'll see if he can go Tuesday. I think it's a realistic possibility that he could, according to the two Inquirer reporters in Calgary, Olivia Reiner and Gianna Hahn. Both Ryan Ellis did skate on Saturday. So he was at morning skate, and that was a good sign. Perhaps they just decided, hey, let's get you this final game here in the road trip to sit out. We'll have you ready for Tuesday or at least some point this week. So it sounds like he's trending in the right direction, but clearly this injury has been nagging him. It has lingered not the way the Flyers thought it would. So they're trying to address it and get him back on the ice. But big week ahead for the Flyers. As we noted, games on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You can catch them all on NBC Sports Philadelphia with Joe Fordyce directed pregame live, postgame live, and Taryn Hatcher will have it with you as well. And of course,
just a note on this week, we have a couple mystery guests this week for you to talk about. Well, one of them we'll talk about the upcoming alumni game, which is one of the biggest the Flyers have ever held. Should be a great event coming up, and one of our mystery guests this week will be playing in that game, and he'll talk about that. That'll be on Tuesday, and then we have another one on Thursday that we're pretty excited about. So should be a good week of shows.
I love it, Joe. Yeah, catch that all out this week on Flyers Pregame Live. Good week of hockey ahead, and we'll see more and more what the Flyers are made of as we go forward here. Joe Fordyce, thank you so much as always. Great seeing you. Great chatting with you. We will do this again later this week. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer. Big thank you to Ben. And Flyers fans, as always, thank you for listening to the Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. Wherever you get your podcast, please rate and listen, and we cannot wait to talk to you next time.